In a world that often demands justice, sometimes the most powerful choice you can make is mercy. Explore the complex stories of forgiveness and the incredible strength it takes to let go of the past. Subscribe now to experience these deeply moving human dramas.
I didn't speak at my daughter's funeral. I stood at the edge of that grave in my black dress and my good shoes, and I just watched. People kept touching my arm, saying things I couldn't hear. My son-in-law stood right beside me the whole time, his hand on my back, and I let him keep it there because I didn't have the strength to move away. That was my first mistake. Her name was Priscilla. My Priscilla. 34 years old, healthy as a horse her whole life. And then one Tuesday in March, she was gone. A heart arrhythmia, the doctor said. Sudden cardiac arrest. No warning, no history, no explanation that made any sense to me. She'd just had her annual physical 6 weeks before. Everything was fine. Everything was always fine with Priscilla. I buried that question with her. Or I tried to. My son-in-law, I'll call him what he was to me, nothing more, had been with my daughter for 8 years. They married 5 years ago in a small ceremony in Savannah, which is where they'd settled after he took a job managing a regional logistics company. I wasn't crazy about him from the start, but Priscilla loved him, and my daughter was not a woman who made foolish choices. She had a master's degree in accounting. She ran her own bookkeeping firm out of their home. She was careful, deliberate, brilliant with numbers. If she chose him, I told myself she had her reasons. After the funeral, he was attentive, kind even. He made sure I had a place to stay, handled the arrangements, sent thank you notes on behalf of both of them, of us. He cried at the right moments. He said all the right things. I drove back home to Columbia 3 weeks later with a box of Priscilla's things he'd packed for me. A few photo albums, her college diploma, a sweater I'd given her one Christmas that she never wore but kept anyway because she was sentimental like that. I sat in my living room with that box on my coffee table, and I didn't open it for 4 days. On the 5th day, my phone rang. It was a woman named, well, let's call her what she was to me too. Priscilla's landlady. Not the landlady of their house, but of a small office space my daughter had been renting downtown. A room, really. One desk, a filing cabinet, a window that looked out onto a parking deck. Priscilla had rented it separately from the house for 3 years, using it as a second workspace for her more sensitive client files. I hadn't even known about it until that phone call. Mrs. Beaumont, she said. That's my name, Ernestine Beaumont, though most people call me Ernie. Mrs. Beaumont, I didn't want to bother you so soon after everything, but I need you to come see something. I don't think you should wait. I asked her what it was. I'd rather show you in person, she said. And I have to ask, please don't mention this to your son-in-law. Not yet. Please. The way she said not yet sat in my chest like a stone for the entire 4-hour drive back to Savannah. The office was on the 3rd floor of a brick building off Broughton Street. The landlady met me at the door, a small woman in her 60s, white hair, reading glasses on a beaded chain. She'd managed the building for 20 years. She and Priscilla had gotten to be friendly over time. She knew my daughter's schedule, knew her habits. She led me down the hall and unlocked the office with a key. I came to clean it out, she said. Your son-in-law said he'd come by weeks ago and never did. I figured I'd gather things up for the family. She paused. And then I found this. The desk was mostly cleared, but tucked behind the filing cabinet, not inside it, behind it, pushed flat against the wall, was a large manila envelope, sealed with 2 layers of tape, with my name written on the front in Priscilla's handwriting. Mom, for your eyes only. My hands were shaking so badly the landlady had to help me open it. Inside was a letter, 12 pages in Priscilla's careful print, and a USB drive taped to the last page. I sat down in my daughter's chair. I read every word. I won't tell you I was prepared for what I found. Nothing prepares you for that. But I will tell you that somewhere in the 3rd page, something clicked into place inside me, a cold, quiet kind of knowing, and I stopped crying. I just read. Priscilla had discovered, roughly 18 months before she died, that her husband had been embezzling from his company. Not small amounts. Over 3 years, he had moved more than $400,000 through a series of shell accounts he'd set up under variations of their joint business. Variations close enough to look like clerical errors, different enough to route money to a separate account she'd never seen. He'd used her firm's name in 2 of the account registrations without her knowledge. He had, in effect, made her an unwitting accessory to financial fraud. She'd found the first discrepancy by accident, reconciling a quarterly statement. When she pulled the thread, the whole thing unraveled. She confronted him. He told her she was misreading the numbers. She was an accountant with 15 years of experience. She knew exactly what she was reading. She wrote in the letter, "He looked me in the eye and told me I was confused." I think that was the moment I knew I didn't know him at all. She didn't go to the police. Not yet. She was building a case. She'd been documenting everything for 8 months, quietly, methodically, the way she did everything. The USB drive contained copies of every document: bank statements, account registrations, wire transfer records, emails he thought he'd deleted, but that she'd recovered from their shared cloud backup. She had also been in contact with an attorney, not a divorce attorney, a forensic financial specialist. And then on a Tuesday in March, my daughter's heart stopped. 34 years old, no history, no warning. I sat in that office for a long time after I finished reading. I am 63 years old. I taught middle school science for 28 years. I am not a detective. I am not a lawyer. I am not a person who knows what to do with a USB drive full of financial records or a dead daughter's 12-page letter. But I am a mother, and my daughter had spent the last 8 months of her life building something, and she had written my name on the envelope. I called Priscilla's attorney from the parking deck outside. The woman was still listed in my daughter's contacts under a first name only. I'd assumed she was a friend. She wasn't. She'd been waiting to hear from someone in the family. She'd been hoping it would be me. "Your daughter told me if anything happened to her," the attorney said carefully, "that she wanted her mother to have this information. She said you were the only one she trusted." I asked her what she thought happened to my daughter. There was a pause. "Mrs. Beaumont," she said, "I think that's a question you should bring to the right people." I understood what she was not saying. Here is what I know about grief. It can make you small. It can press you down into yourself until you are barely there. For 3 weeks after the funeral, I had been that kind of small. I'd let people lead me from room to room. I'd eaten whatever was put in front of me. I'd thanked people for their condolences and meant none of it because I was too hollowed out to mean anything. I drove back to Columbia that night, feeling something entirely different. I am not proud of what I did next. I should have gone straight to the police. I know that now. But I'd spent 30 years teaching 12-year-olds, and one thing I learned is that children, and some adults, will deny everything if they know you're coming. I needed to understand what I was holding before I handed it to anyone. My nephew, Priscilla's cousin, works in IT. I called him that night, and he spent 3 hours going through the USB drive with me over video call, walking me through what was there, what it meant, how the accounts were structured. By midnight, we had a clear picture. The money was gone, most of it, but the trail was intact. Every transaction was documented. And buried in a subfolder Priscilla had labeled simply his phone were screenshots. Text messages between her husband and someone she'd identified only as his business contact. A man who appeared, from context, to be someone he owed a significant sum of money. A very significant sum. The texts stopped 6 days before Priscilla died. The last message from the contact read, "You have until the end of the month. Don't make me come looking." My son-in-law's reply, the final message in the chain, "It's handled." I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea that went cold, and I turned that phrase over and over in my mind. It's handled. My daughter, who had discovered his fraud, who was building a case against him, who was the only person standing between him and complete exposure, had died 6 days later. It's handled. I went to the police the next morning. Not the Savannah police. I drove to the county sheriff's office. Because I didn't know who might know whom, and because Priscilla's attorney had advised me, quietly, to start there. I brought everything. The letter, the USB drive, the attorney's contact information. A printed summary my nephew had helped me prepare. The detective who took my statement was a woman close to my age with short gray locks and reading glasses similar to the landlady's. She read through everything without expression. She asked me careful questions. She asked me if I'd had any contact with my son-in-law since finding the envelope. I told her no. She told me to keep it that way. What happened over the next 6 weeks, I will not pretend was simple or clean. It was not a television show. There were days when no one called me back. There were days when I thought I had imagined the whole thing, that I was a grieving mother manufacturing meaning where there was none. My sister came to stay with me for 2 weeks because she was worried. I didn't tell her what I was doing. I couldn't risk anyone saying the wrong thing to the wrong person. The forensic financial investigation moved faster than I expected once the authorities had the documentation Priscilla had assembled. She had done their work for them, essentially. Every account, every transfer, every registration, organized, dated, annotated in her precise handwriting. My daughter was thorough even in her fear. What took longer was the other part. The medical examiner's office conducted a secondary review at the detective's request. Priscilla's case had been closed as natural causes. A healthy 34-year-old woman with no cardiac history, a minor arrhythmia, a sudden death. It happened. It was terrible, but it happened. Except the secondary review found something the first hadn't looked for, a medication interaction. Priscilla had been prescribed a new blood pressure medication 6 weeks before she died. Her doctor confirmed this, a routine precaution, after a slightly elevated reading at her physical. What her doctor hadn't known, because it hadn't been disclosed, was that she'd also been taking an herbal supplement, one that interacted dangerously with her prescription, severely enough, under the right circumstances, to cause cardiac arrest. The supplement was not something Priscilla had purchased. Her credit card records and online purchase history showed no trace of it. She'd never mentioned it to her physician. She'd never mentioned it to her attorney. The bottle was found, eventually, in the back of a bathroom cabinet in their Savannah home, partially used. Purchased with cash at a health food store 40 minutes outside the city. My son-in-law was arrested on a Thursday morning. I was in Columbia when my nephew called to tell me. I was standing in my kitchen making coffee. I set the mug down very carefully, and I held onto the counter and I breathed. I cried then. I hadn't cried since the envelope, but I cried then for a long time because my daughter had been so careful and so brave and so alone, and she had tried so hard to protect herself, and she had written my name on the envelope, and she was gone anyway. His charges were multiple: financial fraud, wire fraud, and one more charge, the one I'd been waiting for, the one the detective had warned me not to expect too quickly, but that came anyway: first-degree murder. The trial is pending. I am told these things take time. I have nothing but time now. What I want to say, what I think about when I sit with my cold tea at this kitchen table, is not about him. It's about her. About the fact that my daughter spent the last 8 months of her life afraid, and smart, and methodical, and completely alone with what she knew. She didn't come to me because she didn't want to worry me. She didn't go to the police because she wasn't ready, because she was still building, because she thought she had more time. She wrote my name on that envelope. I want every woman who is listening to hear this. If something is wrong, do not wait. Do not protect anyone from the truth of what you know. Do not assume you have more time. My daughter was brilliant and careful, and she loved me enough to leave me a way forward, and I am grateful for that every single day. But I would give everything I have to have gotten a phone call from her instead. Trust your instincts. Document everything. Tell someone. And if your heart is telling you that something is wrong, please, please, listen to it while you still can.